Γκραν Πρέρι Texas, Monday, April 22nd, 2002, 2:20 a.m. Don Wise is driving down 111th Street in a partially deserted area.
All of a sudden, Don spots a small fire burning on the side of the road. He decides to keep driving, however, heading for a section up ahead, where he knows there's typically an off-duty Γκραν Πρέρι police officer stationed in his vehicle.
Minutes later, Don alerts Officer James Hannigan to the fire. The officer speeds off in the direction Wise had just come from.
Hannigan arrives at the scene, rushes over, and suddenly discovers that it's in fact a human body on fire. The officer extinguishes the flames, and then he radios for backup.
Γκραν Πρέρι police arrive within minutes and start processing the scene. Detective Mike Gudgel leads the investigation.
The body is charred beyond recognition and there's no ID. All police know is that the victim is a white male. The man's body has been wrapped in an electric blanket and a blue tarp.
Investigators determined that an accelerant had been used to set the victim on fire, most likely in an attempt to destroy evidence.
However, the killer has left behind one critical clue. Just 10 feet from the body, officers find a unique set of tire tracks, which had been made by a truck with dual rear wheels.
Around 9:30 that Monday morning, the Tarrant County medical examiner conducts an autopsy on the victim.
The fact that his ribs are cracked leads the medical examiner to conclude that he was killed by a single gunshot, which had traveled through his lungs and heart.
It is believed the shooting occurred 36 to 48 hours before the body was discovered, which would place the time of death anywhere between Thursday evening and early Friday morning.
The Γκραν Πρέρι Police Department sends out a teletype alerting law enforcement agencies across Texas about their victim. At 2:30 that afternoon, they receive a call from Detective Larry Hallmark of the Grapevine Police Department, which is 20 miles north of Γκραν Πρέρι.
Hallmark tells his counterparts in Γκραν Πρέρι about a 40-year-old man named David Nixon, whose ex-wife, Donna Lella, reported him missing just 15 hours prior.
Detective Hallmark and his partner immediately review the information received from Donna Lella.
Donna claimed the last time she spoke to her ex-husband was Thursday afternoon, April 18th. David failed to contact or return calls from his 10-year-old son, Nicholas, throughout the weekend, which was totally out of character for him. It was Donna's opinion that David met with foul play. When she initially spoke to police, she told them that David and his current girlfriend, 32-year-old Tracy Frame, had recently been arguing quite a bit.
As far as Donna's concerned, Tracy Frame might be the person responsible for David's sudden disappearance.
Grapevine police put out an APB on David Nixon's car, a 2000 white Lexus, which is also missing.
Grapevine, Texas, Monday, April 22nd, 2002, 4:40 p.m. Detective Hallmark and his partner Todd Karfs arrive at the house on Pecan Hollow Court. Tracy Frame has shared with David Nixon for several years.
Just 2 weeks earlier, on April 9th, Grapevine police had been dispatched to the residence after both Tracy and David claimed they were physically attacked by one another. No one was arrested.
Hallmark and Karfs waste no time asking Tracy about David.
Tracy says the last time she spoke to David was Thursday afternoon, April 18th. David had informed her that he'd been showing houses that night, and then he was possibly going to meet up with his friend Jerry for a drink near the Grapevine Lake.
Tracy admits her relationship with David has soured. A big reason why, she claims, is because she miscarried back around December 30th, allegedly as a result of David pushing her down.
Tracy explains that on April 9th, she decided to change the locks on the house. This led to the fight, which precipitated the domestic disturbance call to Grapevine police. She claims that David had been staying at hotels ever since that time.
Hallmark confronts Tracy, knowing her comments about David's whereabouts are inconsistent with statements she previously made.
Tracy had told an officer David moved and was working out of state. Her only explanation for the discrepancy is that David frequently skipped town without letting people know where he was.
Detectives leave the house uncertain of whether or not David Nixon is just missing or if he's actually dead. They also remain uncertain of whether or not Tracy Frame has any involvement in the incident.
The following morning, April 23rd, David and Tracy's neighbor, Frank Svoboda, calls the Grapevine police.
Svoboda tells a detective that he saw a Penske truck outside David and Tracy's on Friday the 19th around 11 p.m. When he saw Tracy outside that Sunday afternoon, he asked her about it, and she claims David's friends had used the truck to move some of his things out of the residence.
When detectives interviewed Tracy the previous day, she never mentioned anything about a Penske truck.
Later that Tuesday, Hallmark and Karfs obtained David Nixon's dental records.
Within hours, doctors verified that the John Doe homicide victim found on fire in Γκραν Πρέρι was in fact David Nixon.
Hallmark and Karf's return to Tracy Frame's residence, this time accompanied by Γκραν Πρέρι Detective Mike Gudgel.
The three investigators tell Frame that David Nixon's dead body has been recovered in Γκραν Πρέρι. She immediately starts crying. The first question she asks, how did they identify him? The officers find her question bizarre and telling at the same time.
Frame agrees to accompany the detectives back to the Γκραν Πρέρι Police Department.
Γκραν Πρέρι, Texas, Tuesday, April 23, 2002, 4:45 p.m. Hallmark and Gudgel begin questioning Tracy Frame. Karf's observes via feed from a separate room.
Throughout the interview, Tracy remains evasive, constantly changing her story about the weekend, her relationship with David, how it played out.
And didn't hear from him any Thursday night?
No, sir.
Didn't talk to him Friday?
No.
Nothing Saturday?
No.
Hadn't talked to him since then?
Have not talked to him since then.
Tracy denies there was ever a Penske truck at her home until police confront her about her neighbor Frank contacting them about it. Then she pivots and says she rented it herself to drop off pool and patio furniture at a nearby Goodwill.
Tracy does, however, reveal that she got the rental truck from a feed store on Davis Boulevard, but wavers about the dates she reserved it for.
Detective Karfs decides to call the store Tracy supposedly rented the truck from, Smithfield Feed and Garden.
The owner, Gwynn Edwards, tells Karfs that Tracy Frame did in fact rent a Penske truck and a dolly from them on Friday, April 19th at 3:15 p.m. and kept it throughout the weekend.
Frame didn't return the truck until sometime after Sunday night because Gwynn had gone by the store then and noticed the white Lexus Tracy had driven there was still sitting in the parking lot.
Karfs relays the new information to Hallmark.
When Hallmark steps back into the interview room, he confronts Tracy about his latest lie. Tracy now says she rented the truck from Thursday to Saturday, but insists that she drove her own black Lexus to the shop, not David's white one, which was still missing.
Tracy vehemently denies knowing anything about what happened to David.
What happened to David?
I don't know. I don't know.
Tracy, I will be honest with you. I think you do.
Oh,
And you can't help yourself.
I do not know. Sir, I'm sorry, but I don't know.
There isn't enough evidence to arrest Tracy, so cops let her walk, but they remain suspicious of her possible involvement in David Nixon's homicide. Just after 10:30 p.m. on Tuesday, April 23rd, officers respond to a Tom Thumb grocery store to investigate an abandoned vehicle.
An officer runs the plates. It's David Nixon's missing white Lexus. There are no signs of foul play, but the driver's seat is pushed up very close to the steering wheel, too close to be operated by Nixon, who is 6'4", 240 pounds.
The following morning, Detective Larry Hallmark and another investigator meet with the manager of the Tom Thumb, Larry Avery, to review the store's surveillance tapes.
On the footage, the officers can clearly see the white Lexus driving into the lot at 1:34 a.m. on April 22nd, which was less than an hour before David Nixon's body was discovered on fire.
A woman matching Tracy Frame's build and general appearance gets out of the car and runs across the parking lot. Avery, who knows David and Tracy personally, says unequivocally, "That's her, that's David's girlfriend."
The woman then gets back into a black vehicle and peels out of the parking lot. Avery then recognizes that car as Tracy Frame's Lexus. It heads south toward Γκραν Πρέρι, where David's body would soon be spotted in flames.
In the meantime, Detective Todd Karfs visits Smithfield Feed and Garden, where Tracy had rented a Penske truck to meet with owner Gwynn Edwards.
Edwards allows law enforcement techs to examine the Penske truck she rented to Tracy. They pay particular attention to the different tread patterns on the truck's 6 tires.
An analyst soon connects all of the Penske's truck tread patterns to markings found at the site where David's body was dumped.
Less than 72 hours into the investigation, Grapevine police obtain search warrants for Tracy Frame's black Lexus and her residence. They also secure a warrant for her arrest.
Arlington, Texas, Wednesday, April 24th, 2002, 9:10 p.m. Detectives Hallmark and Karfs and 2 local officers visit the home of Tracy Frame's mother and stepfather.
They know Tracy's been staying there. They enter one of the bedrooms, wake her up, drag her out into the hallway, and handcuff her. She's subsequently escorted back to Grapevine.
Back at Grapevine Police Headquarters, officers take Tracy into an interview room where she refuses to talk. She's booked into county jail and held on $100,000 bail.
Meanwhile, detectives and CSI are already engaged in their search of Tracy's home on Pecan Hollow Court.
Inside the master bedroom, hanging from one of the bedposts, cops find a set of controls belonging to an electric blanket. It's unclear if the controls are in fact for the electric blanket that David Nixon's body had been wrapped in. But there is no sign of an electric blanket anywhere in the house.
Detective Karfs finds 2 letters written by Tracy to David, which offer insight into their relationship.
In one letter, Tracy writes, "I am sorry that I can't seem to please you no matter what I do."
In the other letter, Tracy laments the murder of their unborn baby, saying how she wishes she was dead for what she's done.
Apparently, Tracy didn't miscarry, as she told the police, but had actually had an abortion, which her planner and sonograms reveal occurred in late December 2001.
The afternoon following the search, Thursday, April 25th, Detective Karfs gets a call from Jason Livingston, who works at a local pest control company.
Livingston says that David Nixon has been his customer for years, and that recently David had asked him to service a new place in Southlake, not home on Pecan Hollow Court, which he'd always serviced in the past.
Livingston says David told him he moved out of the Pecan Hollow Court residence without telling Tracy and paid him in cash to service the new home specifically to prevent Tracy from finding out about it.
Back at Grapevine Police Headquarters, Giles Hartenbauer, who's David's colleague from the realty office where he worked, gives a statement to Detective Karfs.
Hartenbauer paints Tracy as a gold digger who refused to get a job, constantly demanded money, and made David pay all the bills.
According to Hartenbauer, David had secured the new place in Southlake but spent most nights sleeping on the couch at Pecan Hollow Court because his lawyer instructed him not to abandon the property.
David had met with attorney John Michael Franks back on April 11th to see how he could reclaim his share of the Pecan Hollow Court house, which had reluctantly been deeded to Tracy 2 years prior when he owed the IRS back taxes.
Apparently, the week prior to his death, David made a deal with Tracy where he'd pay her $20,000 and she would grant him a 50-50 stake in the house.
According to Hartenbauer, David was very fearful of Tracy and suspected she was drugging his nightly glass of wine.
Scared that his arguments with Tracy might turn deadly, David wrote a will, and he took out a $500,000 life insurance policy naming his son Nicholas as a beneficiary and his ex-wife Donna as co-beneficiary.
David stashed the policy and will in his safe at the realty office and gave Hartenbauer specific instructions that if anything happened to him, Hartenbauer should grab everything from the safe and take it to Donna before Tracy could access it.
By Thursday, April 25th, 2002, less than 4 days after realtor David Nixon was found dead and burned on the side of the road in Γκραν Πρέρι, Texas, police arrest his girlfriend Tracy Frame on suspicion of first-degree murder. As law enforcement builds its case against her, Frame is released from Grapevine Jail on $100,000 bond.
Authorities reviewed Tracy and David's phone records and find a huge clue. The last call made from David's cell was at 4:16 p.m. on Friday the 19th to a company called H&H Janitorial Supply.
On Friday, April 26th, Grapevine Police Detective John Luna visits H&H.
Owners Mike and Janine Hayden tell Luna about a strange encounter they had the previous Friday on April 19th. That evening, after closing, a woman came into the store asking how best to clean blood out of tile grout.
The woman claimed that her boyfriend's 10-year-old son had inadvertently spilled fish blood on the tile floor of her home.
Mike recommended muriatic acid to the woman, but told her they didn't carry that product in the store, so he suggested she buy tile and stone cleaner instead.
The woman purchased the cleaner and several other products, totaling over $65.
On Monday, April 29th, detectives returned to the Tom Thumb grocery store to review additional surveillance footage.
Police had already seen footage timestamped from 1:34 a.m. on April 22nd, when a woman looking like Tracy dumped David's white Lexus in the Tom Thumb parking lot. Now they see footage of the same woman making 2 other trips to the store prior to April 22nd.
In one of the new videos, the woman arrives in the parking lot in a Penske truck on the afternoon of April 20th. She leaves on foot walking a large black dog. Tracy owns a large black dog. Another video shows the same woman returning to the parking lot at 9 p.m. on April 21st. She parks a black Lexus near the Penske truck. Tracy owns a black Lexus.
Security cameras from the store's entrance that day show the woman purchase a box of heavy-duty trash bags and a gallon of muriatic acid, then leave the store and drive off in the Penske truck.
Store records indicate the woman from the footage made the purchases using Tracy Frame's discount card in order to save 34 cents.
Even though the surveillance footage doesn't clearly identify the woman as Tracy Frame, detectives are convinced it was her.
Detective Larry Hallmark pieces together a theory for how Tracy Frame killed David Nixon.
Hallmark speculates that Tracy knew David was getting ready to leave her and wanted the house to herself. So on Thursday night, April 18th, she shot David in his sleep. Tracy rented the Penske truck and dolly the following day to transport David's body.
Hallmark believes Tracy had tried to dump the body Friday night, but couldn't get it to fit in the storm drain. That's when she fled the scene in the Penske truck and left behind the distinct tire tracks.
Hallmark theorized that 2 days later, on April 21st, Tracy returned the rental to Smithfield Feed and drops off David's white Lexus at Tom Thumb. Then she drives back to Γκραν Πρέρι with gasoline and matches and sets David Nixon's body on fire in a futile attempt to cover up his identity and her tracks.
On the morning of May 9th, Detective Luna returns to H&H Janitorial and shows owner Mike Hedden a six-pack of suspect photos.
Hedden points to Tracy's photo and says, "If I had to pick one, it would be this one."
With the surveillance footage and positive IDs from the owners at H&H and Tom Thumb, investigators have proof that Tracy Frame seemed to be tying up loose ends in the aftermath of David Nixon's murder.
Grapevine, Texas, Saturday, June 1st, 2002, 9:10 a.m. Cops conduct their second search of Tracy Frame's Pecan Hollow Court residence.
Officers are able to locate and photograph every item on the receipt that they obtained from H&H Janitorial Supply. They also find a gallon bottle of muriatic acid.
They inspect the mattress in the master bedroom, and the box spring doesn't match. Since detectives know David didn't take the mattress to his new house, they theorize that Tracy disposed of it herself, likely because it was the site of David's murder.
On August 15th, 2002, 32-year-old Tracy Frame is charged with first-degree murder in Tarrant County, Texas. Police allege that 4 months prior, Frame shot and killed her boyfriend David Nixon inside the residence they shared, then dumped his body in a storm drain and set it on fire. As Tracy remains out of jail on bail during the lead-up to trial, law enforcement tries to figure out what drove her to commit such a heinous crime.
Tracy Frame was born in October 1969. She grows up in Arlington, Texas. Tracy graduates from a local high school, then apparently attends 2 separate colleges and majors in applied science.
In the spring of 1998, Tracy meets David Nixon at a dinner party. David's second wife, Lisa, had just left him the month before.
Within months, though, she moves into his house on Pecan Hollow Court. David owes almost $100,000 to the IRS, so he has Lisa deed the house to his mother, Doris, who then transfers the deed entirely to Tracy.
Between 1999 and 2000, Tracy works as a comptroller for a local paint company called Color House. But she leaves the position when accusations arise that she embezzled nearly $100,000. The company conducts an internal investigation, which points directly to Tracy's guilt, but she adamantly refused to cop out to it, and she's never charged.
Tracy refuses to get another job. David suspects she has a drug problem and allegedly finds paraphernalia for smoking meth and crack around the house.
According to David's friends, Tracy became aggressive and disrespectful toward David in public. She further embarrasses him by stealing trinkets from several of his friends.
The dynamics between David and Tracy worsen after she gets pregnant when she's supposed to be on birth control. David says he'll leave her if she has the baby. Tracy ends up getting an abortion but resents David for it and threatens to kill him if he ever leaves her.
On April 9th, Tracy goes berserk. She changes all the locks. This leads to a domestic disturbance call. When the officer arrives, Tracy shows him scratches, but David says no, those are self-inflicted.
2 weeks after that, Tracy apparently follows through on her promise as David Nixon ends up dead in a storm drain.
Fort Worth, Texas, Tuesday, March 1st, 2005. The murder case of Tracy Frame gets underway.
The prosecution argues that Tracy Frame lived in a $400,000 home and drove a Lexus. However, as she'd once told a friend, without David, she'd be living in an apartment and driving a Honda, a lifestyle that simply was not acceptable to her.
The state alleges that after Tracy found out David was planning to leave her, she killed him to preserve the lifestyle she felt she deserved.
Prosecutors present a mountain of circumstantial evidence. They include eyewitness accounts about her buying cleaning supplies, surveillance videos from the Tom Thumb grocery store, which clearly depict Tracy driving multiple vehicles and purchasing trash bags and muriatic acid, all the while using her discount card to do so.
David's son, Nicholas, now 14, takes the stand at trial and reveals that his father kept a handgun in a locked safe at the Pecan Hollow courthouse.
Prosecutors present the idea that Tracy could have retrieved David's gun from his safe and shot him with it. However, during the multiple police searches after the murder, the safe was empty. The gun remains missing, which suggests Tracy disposed of it.
Tracy never takes the stand, but her defense team fires back, making the case for reasonable doubt.
The defense claims that law enforcement failing to produce any facts and evidence to connect Frame to the murder would prove reasonable doubt that she was not involved in her boyfriend's murder.
The defense points the finger at everyone but Tracy, claiming that David had substantial gambling debts and potentially had a high dollar bounty on his head at the time of his disappearance.
The defense also tries to show that David's ex-wife, Donna Lella, had motive to want him dead as she stood to benefit from being the co-beneficiary on David's life insurance policy. She claims she received less than $10,000 from David's estate.
On March 9, 2005, the jury finds Tracy Frame guilty of first-degree murder. She's sentenced to 40 years in prison.
Everything Tracy Frame appeared to have done leading up to the murder and after the murder, she was doing so with direct intent. Once she learned David Nixon was planning to leave her, she decided he no longer needed to remain on this planet, so her intention was to kill him so that she could continue to live the lifestyle that David Nixon had given her.
Beverly Hills, California, Sunday, August 20th, 1989, 11:30 p.m. 18-year-old Eric Menendez and his 21-year-old brother Lyle arrive home at their parents' sprawling 9,000-square-foot mansion.
They enter the residence and everything is eerily quiet. As the brothers walk towards the back of the house, they hear the sound of a television broadcast from the TV room.
Eric and Lyle open the door and find their parents dead.
45-year-old Jose Menendez is on the couch, slumped over, having suffered multiple gunshot wounds. His 47-year-old wife, Kitty, is on the floor near a wooden coffee table, having also been shot multiple times.
Lyle makes a frantic call to 911 at 11:47 p.m.
Emergency. Someone killed my parents. Pardon me? Someone killed my parents. What? Who? Are they still there? Yes. The people... No. Were they shot? Yes, man, were they shot? Yes. They were shot? Yes.
The Beverly Hills Police Department dispatches officers to the residence.
As the two first responders pull up to the scene, they watch Eric and Lyle bust through the front doors and throw themselves down on the lawn, screaming and crying.
The brothers are soon placed into a squad car and taken down to the Beverly Hills Police Department for questioning.
Detective Les Zeller arrives within minutes and takes the lead.
Jose and Kitty Menendez are virtually unrecognizable. Jose's head has been blown wide open from an apparent shotgun blast to the back of the skull.
Kitty sustained gunshot wounds to the chest, arm, hip, and leg, and one to her face. From the positioning of her body, it appears she was trying to run away from the shooter.
There's blood everywhere. 12-gauge shotgun shells filled with birdshot have destroyed furniture and shattered the French doors leading to the terrace.
Investigators find two .22 caliber rifles in the master bedroom, but they aren't the weapons used to mow down the Menendezes.
The actual murder weapons are nowhere to be found. Neither are the spent shotgun shells. Jose and Kitty's killer took the time to clean up.
Both Jose and Kitty were shot in the knees and the head, which can be characteristics of a mob-style execution. Cops wonder if they're looking at a professional hit.
Beverly Hills Police Headquarters, Monday, August 21st, 1989, 1 a.m. Sergeant Thomas Edmonds questions Eric and Lyle Menendez.
Eric, clearly disturbed over finding his parents dead, spends most of the interview in tears.
Lyle walks Edmonds through their actions that day. That morning, Eric had practiced tennis at the court in their backyard. Afterward, the entire family watched the tennis match on TV.
That afternoon, Lyle and his little brother went to the Beverly Center Mall, hung out for a while, then made plans to meet a friend, Perry Berman, at a food festival in Santa Monica.
According to Lyle, at 8 o'clock that night, they went to Westwood to see the movie License to Kill, but the lines were too long. So they went to Century City Mall and watched Batman instead.
After the movie, they headed down to Santa Monica to meet Perry, but they didn't connect with him there, so they made plans to meet up with him a little later at the Cheesecake Factory.
Lyle tells Sergeant Edmonds that he and his brother returned home because Eric wanted to retrieve his fake ID so he could grab a drink while they were out. When they entered the house, they saw the bloodbath in the TV room.
Sergeant Edmonds asks Lyle who might have motive to kill his parents.
Lyle isn't sure, but mentions that his mother had recently become very paranoid and was militant about locking the doors around the house. Apparently, she recently bought the two shotguns detectives had found at the scene.
As Lyle boasts about his father's business moves, it becomes apparent that Jose was a ruthless businessman who made his share of enemies on the way to his current post as chairman and CEO of Live Entertainment.
Lyle specifically mentions a man named Noel Bloom as a possible suspect, saying that Bloom had been pushed out of the company. Not only was there bad blood between Noel and Jose, Noel allegedly had connections to organized crime.
Over the next 2 weeks, police work the mob angle, but keep a constant eye on the Menendez brothers.
Eric and Lyle embark on a spending spree, living out of lavish hotel suites paid for by their father's company.
As the new self-appointed head of the family, Lyle decides he needs to upgrade his look. He drags his brother to a jewelry store, buys a $12,000 Rolex, 2 other watches, and money clips.
Lyle soon returns to Princeton University, where he's an undergrad. He hires a bodyguard and a limo driver to escort him around, claiming he fears possible mob retaliation.
During one limo ride around town, Lyle buys $40,000 worth of clothes and a $64,000 limited edition Porsche to replace the Alfa Romeo his father had given him just a few years back.
Back in Los Angeles, Eric buys 2 new cars of his own. Instead of starting classes at UCLA as he'd planned, he decides to work towards becoming a professional tennis player.
In the meantime, Beverly Hills police field multiple tips about Jose Menendez and his unique ability to rub almost everyone he'd come in contact with the wrong way. They decide to dig deeper into Jose's former business associate, Noel Bloom.
In January 1987, Bloom had been pushed out of his executive position at Live Entertainment as part of a personnel slash and burn orchestrated by Jose Menendez.
Bloom ended up filing a suit against the company. Not too long before the murders, Jose had testified against him and humiliated him in court. It's thought by some that Neil Bloom wanted to settle the score.
In September 1989, Bloom meets with detectives from the Beverly Hills Police Department. After questioning him, they're convinced he had nothing to do with the murder of Jose and Kitty Menendez.
He's subsequently removed from the suspect list as the authorities concentrate on potential suspects closer to the family.
That September, Detective Zeller interviews a man named Peter Weir, who's the husband of Kitty's best friend.
Weir drops a bombshell, saying, "I have no basis for this, but I wonder if the boys did it."
Weir was always of the opinion that Lyle and Eric were almost too good to be true when their parents were around, but hellraisers as soon as their parents were out of sight.
Despite their initial cooperation, Eric and Lyle stopped communicating with the Beverly Hills Police Department about the progress of the investigation.
On September 17th, detectives Les Zeller and Tom Linehan visit Jose's sister Terry in New Jersey and end up questioning Eric and Lyle, who show up at their aunt's unannounced for a visit. The boys aren't very forthcoming.
Zeller and Linehan ask the boys if they can provide their movie ticket stubs from the night of the killings. They say they don't have them. As the detectives leave the house, they become increasingly suspicious of the Menendez brothers.
That September, Detective Zeller receives a call from Glenn Stevens, a member of Lyle's inner circle at Princeton.
Stevens tells Zeller that he personally had become suspicious that his friend could be involved in the murder.
Stevens then gives a critical piece of information. In late August, Lyle hired a guy to wipe clean the hard drive on his parents' home computer because it contained a document related to his father's will.
After Lyle flew back to Princeton, he told Stevens what he had done and said that he could only lose if a new will was written up because the old will set him and his brother up to inherit everything.
Beverly Hills, California, Tuesday, October 24th, 1989. Detective Zeller visits Eric at the Menendez mansion.
Zeller asks Eric about his father's will being erased. Eric admits that Lyle handled it before he could try.
Zeller directly asks Eric if he thinks Lyle could have been involved or hired a hit. Eric defiantly says no.
Santa Barbara, California, Friday, November 17th, 1989. Detectives Linehan and Zeller track down Eric's close friend, Craig Signorelli, on campus at the University of California, Santa Barbara.
Craig tells the officers that in the days after the murder, Eric had asked him if he wanted to know how it happened. It meaning the murders.
Eric apparently told Craig that he and Lyle did stop home that night to get his fake ID. However, when Eric exited the house, Lyle was standing outside by the car holding 2 shotguns and said, "Let's do it." Craig says Eric told him Lyle shot Jose twice, but he was unable to shoot his mother, so she got up to run away. When she did, Lyle shot her too. Eric then pumped 2 more rounds into her.
Hoping to get the story on tape, Zeller convinces Signorelli to wear a wire the next time he gets together with Menendez.
Pacific Palisades, California, Wednesday, November 29th, 1989. Craig meets up with Eric Menendez at Gladstone's restaurant.
Craig pretends that police think he's a suspect. Eric asks Craig if he told investigators what they'd previously talked about. Craig responds sarcastically saying, "Yeah."
Then Craig asks Eric in earnest if he had been telling the truth. Eric flat out says no, and that perhaps he shouldn't have joked around about it.
The taped conversation convinces the Beverly Hills Police Department that Craig Signorelli was telling the truth about Eric and Lyle's participation in their parents' murders.
Then, in March 1990, the BHPD receives information from 37-year-old former actress Judalyn Smith that breaks the murder investigation wide open.
On Monday, March 5th, Detective Zeller conducts a taped interview with Smith at her home. She reveals that Eric and Lyle Menendez confessed to a psychologist that they killed their parents.
Smith explains that her former lover, Beverly Hills psychologist Jerry Oziel, used to treat Eric back in 1988.
On Halloween Day 1989, Eric went to see Dr. Oziel, saying he needed to talk.
Smith says the doctor wanted her to be there in case things went awry. So she arrived at the medical office shortly after 4 and sat in the waiting room pretending to be another patient. Within minutes, Eric and Oziel showed up, having returned from a walk, during which Eric confessed he and Lyle killed their parents.
Smith claims she subsequently overheard Oziel call Lyle. 15 minutes later, Lyle was buzzed into the doctor's office. Before long, she heard Lyle screaming, "I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you told him."
Apparently, Lyle then made a threat, saying, "I hope you know what we have to do now. We've got to kill him and anyone associated with him." Eric then ran out of the office with Lyle and Oziel following.
At the elevator, Oziel asked Lyle if he had just made a threat. Lyle just shook his hand and said, "Good luck."
Smith says that even though Oziel moved his wife and children in with neighbors and then moved himself in with her, he did get the Menendez brothers to return on November 2nd and December 11th.
Smith leaves the detectives with 2 leads to follow up on. One, that Eric and Lyle purchased the shotguns used to kill their parents in San Diego. And 2, that Oziel recorded the December 11th session and still had the tapes.
In March 1990, 8 months into their investigation of the murders of Jose and Kitty Menendez, police learned that the Menendez's sons, Eric and Lyle, confessed on tape to a psychologist that they committed the murders.
37-year-old former actress Judalyn Smith tells BHPD detective Les Zeller that her former lover, Dr. Jerry Oziel, still has tapes from the session during which the Menendez brothers made the startling confession.
Beverly Hills, California, Thursday, March 8, 1990. Investigators execute search warrants on Dr. Oziel's home, office, and safety deposit box.
Officers retrieved 17 tapes and 7 pages of notes from the safety deposit box. After listening to a few snippets from the tapes, cops decide to move on arresting Eric and Lyle Menendez.
As Beverly Hills police conduct their searches, Lyle Menendez flies back home to California from Princeton. He hangs out with friends at his family's mansion.
Around 1 p.m. that Thursday, Lyle and company head out to the Cheesecake Factory.
As they cruise down Elm Drive, they spot a vehicle blockade at the corner ahead.
Suddenly, armed officers jump out from vehicles in nearby bushes. They order the 3 men out of the car and force them to lie down in the street. Lyle is then handcuffed and taken into custody.
Lyle is booked on suspicion of murder, then transferred to Men's Central Jail.
Eric Menendez has been overseas in Israel, playing in his first pro tennis tournament. After his brother's arrest, a friend calls and tells him
Eric flies back to the States, landing in West Palm Beach, Florida, where his aunt convinces him to turn himself in.
On March 11th, Eric flies back to Los Angeles.
4 detectives meet Eric at LAX. He's cuffed and sent to the Men's Central Jail on suspicion of murder, just like his older brother. Both are held without bond.
3 days later, acting on Judalyn Smith's tip about the murder weapons, detectives visit gun stores in the San Diego area. They hit the jackpot at a local Big Five.
On August 18, 1989, Donovan Goudreau purchased 2 Mossberg 12-gauge shotguns at the Big Five.
As it turns out, Goudreau is Lyle Menendez's former roommate from Princeton. Cops later determined that Eric Menendez had posed as Donovan Goudreau and forged his signature to buy the shotguns at Big Five.
On December 8, 1992, Eric and Lyle Menendez are each indicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances. They plead not guilty. During the lead-up to trial, authorities dig into the Menendez brothers' background, hoping to find answers for why they could have possibly wanted their parents dead.
Joseph Lyle Menendez is born in January 1968. Eric comes in November 1970. Their father, Jose, had immigrated to the U.S. from Cuba when he was 15, earning an accounting degree, and worked his way up the corporate ladder. Their mother is a stay-at-home mom.
Jose rules the household with an iron hand.
If they misstep, they're disciplined with a belt or a trip to their bedrooms where they're locked in for hours.
Over time, Lyle learns to suppress his emotions, to the point most people think he has none. Eric, by contrast, is creative and sensitive.
Both boys grow up developmentally behind. At 14, Lyle still wets the bed, plays with stuffed animals, and lets his mother wash his hair in the bathtub.
In 1986, Jose lands a job with International Video Entertainment, which later becomes Live Entertainment. The family moves to Calabasas, a suburb 30 miles northwest of Los Angeles.
Even though Jose brings in a salary of $500,000 a year, life at the Menendez is far from rosy. In fact, Kitty makes multiple suicide attempts, which the family just glosses over.
The boys soon turn into problem children. Lyle is suspended from Princeton for a year in the fall of 1987 for cheating in his Psych 101 class.
Meanwhile, Eric attends Calabasas High School. He and fellow student Craig Signorelli often discuss The Perfect Crime, which they translate into a screenplay called Friends, about a young guy who commits 5 murders, starting with his own parents.
In July 1988, Eric and his friends burglarized 2 nearby homes for over $100,000 worth of cash, jewelry, and other items.
Because he's underage, Eric is sentenced to community service, probation, and some court-ordered counseling. He ends up seeing Dr. Jerry Oziel.
In the fall of 1988, Jose moves the family from Calabasas to Beverly Hills, virtually overnight. Eric transfers to Beverly Hills High, while Lyle is finally able to go back to Princeton.
Before long, Lyle gets put on academic probation, loses his license, and gets the family kicked out of a country club after damaging property during a joyride across the course.
Jose is so frustrated with cleaning up his son's messes that he considers cutting them out of the will.
By the summer of 1989, Kitty learns from Dr. Oziel and her own therapist that Eric and Lyle might actually be sociopaths. Before the summer's out, Jose and Kitty are dead.
Van Nuys, California, Tuesday, July 20th, 1993. The murder trial of Eric and Lyle Menendez gets underway at Van Nuys Superior Court. The brothers are tried together, but given different juries.
For Lyle's jury, prosecutors described the brutality of the murders and his decision to erase what could have been his father's revised will, which would have disinherited him. Lyle, according to the state, was motivated by money to kill and eager to fill his father's shoes.
For Eric's jury, the prosecution outlines how Eric wanted to get rid of his father, whose controlling ways made him feel inadequate.
The brothers' attorneys don't dispute the fact the boys killed their parents.
The defense asserts that Eric and Lyle didn't kill their parents for money, but because they were afraid of their brutal, manipulative, and sexually perverse ways.
According to the defense, not only did Jose Menendez control the boys' lives absolutely, he and Kitty allegedly sexually abused them for years. On that fateful August 1989 night, Eric and Lyle had confronted their parents about the abuse and got so scared they killed Jose and Kitty in self-defense.
Dr. Jerry Oziel testifies for 6 days.
According to Oziel, Eric told him that he and Lyle killed Jose because he was overbearing. They killed Kitty as collateral damage to prevent an eyewitness, and because she wouldn't want to go on without Jose anyway.
Oziel paints Eric as the ringleader, saying he's the one who entered the room first and shot Jose, but that Lyle finished the job. Apparently, the brothers had even taken the time to reload.
Eric allegedly told Oziel that after the shooting was done, he and Lyle tossed their bloody clothes into a dumpster and threw the shotguns down a hillside along Mulholland Drive, thinking that they had committed the perfect murder.
Lyle Menendez takes the stand for 9 days.
Lyle said he loved his parents but killed them out of fear. He alleges that his father sexually abused him from the age of 6 to the age of 8, and that his mother sometimes forced him to touch her in bed.
Lyle says that the Tuesday before the murders, he and his mom got into an argument that ended with her ripping off his $1,400 hairpiece he had worn since he was 14.
Right after that event, Lyle says his brother confessed to him that he was being abused by their father. Lyle confronted his father and ended up walking away from the conversation, thinking Jose would kill him and Eric before he'd let the family's dark secrets get out.
Eric Menendez testifies for 10 days.
He corroborates Lyle's claims of abuse, but adds that he was abused by his father from age 6 up until the time of the murders. Eric says he was looking forward to attending UCLA in the fall of 1989 because it would allow him to escape the alleged abuse.
Apparently, just days before the murders, Jose told Eric he'd have to spend several nights a week at home. At that moment, he became terrified that the abuse would continue.
The judge eventually admits into evidence Dr. Oziel's December 11th, 1989 recording of the Menendez brothers' session. The tape is damning.
Eric and Lyle repeatedly talk on the tape about how Jose was controlling and needed to die. but never once state anything about sexual abuse.
On January 13th, 1994, Eric's jury announces they're deadlocked. The judge declares a mistrial in his case.
On January 25th, when Lyle's jury announces that they are also hopelessly deadlocked, the judge then declares a mistrial for Lyle Menendez too.
In October 1995, Eric and Lyle are retried at Van Nuys Superior Court.
This time, there's only one jury. Eric testifies, Lyle does not.
On March 20th, 1996, Eric and Lyle Menendez are both found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder with special circumstances. In July, they're both sentenced to life in prison.
Lyle and Eric Menendez killed their parents not because they were abused. This was psychoses. Lyle and Eric were complete sociopaths acting out of their best interest, and this was in their DNA, not in the way they were raised.